I once believed love was meant to last forever, but that's one of the harshest truths they don't tell you. The lies, the betrayal, and the moment I realized that the child I had been raising wasn't even mine, it was all too much to bear. One simple DNA test shattered my world, turning everything I knew upside down. She stole my family, my future, and even a piece of my soul. As if that wasn't enough, she dragged me through hell, hurling accusations that left me breathless. "You're a monster," she screamed. But little did she know, I was the one pulling the strings now. Soon, she would learn what real pain felt like. I sank into my chair, staring blankly at the email from my landlord. The words blurred as I reread them. Dear Mr. James Matthews, I am writing to inform you that you have not paid your weekly rent of $270 on time. This is now a recurring issue, and you currently owe $4,320. You have 7 days to pay this amount in full or you will have to move out. Sincerely, Jonathan Blake. My head dropped to the desk as I fought back tears. It had been a grueling year. After 2 years of marriage, my wife gave birth to our first child, a beautiful baby boy. Even though I didn't see much of myself in him, I tried to embrace my role as a father. My own father, thrilled to become a grandparent, had started working on our family tree. He contacted a company specializing in genealogical tests and bought kits for all of us, including myself. We waited a month for the results, a month filled with anticipation that quickly turned to heartbreak when my wife revealed the shocking truth about our son's parentage. With undeniable proof in hand, I packed my bags and checked into a motel for a week. Thankfully, our finances had been kept separate. She had taken everything from our shared savings, but I still had a small stash of my own. Then came the lawsuit, accusations of lies and betrayal that blindsided me. In court, I felt like the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the hero. 6 months later, after a week in jail and depleting all my savings, the claims against me were finally dropped. But being exonerated didn't magically restore my job. My parents, who had initially supported me, pulled away when tragedy struck. 4 months ago, they were in a car accident caused by a drunk driver on their way to see me. My mother fought for 8 agonizing days before passing, and my father followed just 2 days later. They hadn't left much behind. Their house was mostly mortgaged, and I couldn't contest their will from jail. I was forced to watch their belongings packed up, sold, or donated while I helplessly stood by. The odd jobs I managed to find barely kept me afloat, offering little in terms of stability. Dread had coiled in my stomach as I anticipated the day I would receive this email, and now it felt like the last thread was snapping. A quick check of my bank account confirmed my worst fears: I was broke. That realization struck me so hard that I let out a bitter laugh before tears threatened to spill over. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts as I stepped into the shower. The water was lukewarm but refreshing, if only for a moment. After dressing in the bare essentials, I grabbed my phone, which I couldn't use to call anyone, and my wallet, which contained only my ID. I knew of a soup kitchen nearby where I could grab a meal. There might even be a chance to find some work for the day, which would help ease my burden just a little. As I stepped outside, I closed and locked the door behind me. If it weren't for my laptop, I would have given up completely. "Mr. Matthews." A voice called from behind me. I turned to see a tall woman in a sharp business suit. My patience was thin. "I'm broke and about to lose my home," I replied, annoyance seeping into my voice as I began walking downstairs, determined to ignore her. But then I heard her heels clicking on the stairs behind me. I thought about just leaving, but she called out, "Mr. Matthews, please wait." I turned back, shooting her a glare. "What do you want?" "I have nothing." At that moment, 2 men stepped forward, gripping my arms tightly. "Let him go, gentlemen," the woman ordered, her voice commanding. They released me, and I took a moment to assess her. She was slightly shorter than me, with light brown hair that framed her face. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated her looks, but now, I felt too drained to care. Can we get on with this? The soup kitchen is closing soon, and I need to get there, I said, my irritation clear. You took a family tree DNA test recently, didn't you? She asked, her tone serious. I sighed, yes. That's what turned my life upside down. Why do you want to know? Mr. Matthews, the challenges you faced were caused by someone who wronged you. Your DNA test led me to you, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. I stared at her, unsure how to process her words. My name is Cassandra Ellis, and I was the assistant to Boris Carmichael. I rubbed my eyes, trying to recall the name, but it didn't ring a bell. Should I know who that is? I asked, puzzled. If you did, we would have spoken a long time ago. No, the Foundation paid a substantial amount to find you, Mr. Matthews. It was only through a last-ditch effort to compare his DNA with public records that we discovered his last living heir, me. Me? I asked, still confused. Yes, you, Mr. Matthews. We will need to conduct a legal DNA test to confirm, but we are confident you are his heir. I stood there, bewildered. After a moment, I asked, what do I need to do? And what if you're wrong? If we are incorrect and you are not Boris Carmichael's heir, I've arranged for $30,000 to be deposited into your account. We will also offer you a job for your peace of mind. If you are indeed the heir, you will receive your inheritance. I shook my head in disbelief. This felt too good to be true, yet I couldn't dismiss her offer outright. If this was some elaborate trick, they would be sorely disappointed. But if I really was the heir, it could change everything for me. $30,000 and a job, all for taking a DNA test I had already completed. What do we do now? I asked, trying to wrap my head around the possibilities. The woman smiled. Unless you want some soup, I think we should find a better place to eat. Do you have any other clothes? I looked down at my worn outfit. No, this is all I have left. I sold everything of value while I was in prison. Cassandra frowned slightly. Okay, we need to find a place that works for your outfit. One of her assistants opened the back door of a sleek limousine, and she gestured for me to follow her inside. As I sat down, I felt entirely out of place. The luxury of the vehicle contrasted sharply with the struggles I had been facing for the past year. Yet beneath the surface of my despair, a flicker of hope ignited. Maybe this was the chance I needed to turn my life around. As I settled into the plush seat of the luxury car, I couldn't help but feel a pang of disbelief. The comfortable upholstery contrasted sharply with the old, worn clothes I had been used to. The woman next to me was on her phone, making reservations at a restaurant I had never even heard of. After hanging up, she called someone else and continued her conversation, her voice low and smooth. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to sink into the softness of the seat. It was the first real comfort I had felt since before my time in prison, and before I knew it, I had dozed off. A gentle shake jolted me awake. I blinked and saw the assistant stepping back, a hint of apology on his face. Sorry, sir. Miss Lays asked me to wake you. She's already inside, he said. Rubbing my eyes, I climbed out of the car and thanked him for the smooth ride. I had a good nap, I added, still trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. He nodded slightly, and I turned to see where we had stopped. This was definitely unfamiliar territory. The restaurant before me looked extravagant, with patrons dressed in elegant attire that made me feel distinctly out of my league. I caught a glimpse of Miss Lays at the front, speaking with the concierge. He frowned at me momentarily, but her words seemed to ease his demeanor, and he motioned for me to follow. Miss Lays turned and walked in gracefully, and I fell in step behind her, still feeling somewhat like a fish out of water. Even during my marriage, we never dined at places like this. The decor was all shiny surfaces and elegant details, the predominant shades of off-white accented by a few vibrant flowers on the tables. We moved towards what appeared to be private dining rooms at the back of the restaurant. The concierge led us into a cozy little room with only one table. Soft candlelight flickered around us, creating an intimate atmosphere. He helped Miss Lays take a seat, and before I could pull my chair out, he vanished, leaving behind 2 menus with a slight bow. Miss Lays, I began, but she interrupted me. Apologies, Mr. Matthews. You can call me Cassandra. Okay, Cassandra. Please call me James. But, why did you bring me here? I feel a bit out of place, especially in these clothes. Cassandra smiled knowingly. That's precisely why we have a private dining room. They wouldn't let you in otherwise. I glanced around, bewildered. If this was what she considered fancy, I could only imagine the wealth of the man she referred to, Morris. The shiny glasses, silverware, and plates with gold edges made me feel small. Dropping the topic, I picked up the menu, surprised to see prices that made my eyes widen. Half the items weren't even in English. Just then, the concierge returned with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I ignored him while he expertly opened the bottle and poured. As Cassandra placed her order, I was jolted back to reality. Could I just get a good steak? I asked, suddenly unsure of myself. The concierge raised an eyebrow in surprise. With chips and gravy, I suppose? He teased lightly. Yes, please. A big steak, medium rare, with chips and gravy, I responded, feeling a surge of relief. The concierge nodded and slipped away, and Cassandra shot me a curious glance that she quickly masked. Don't worry, Mr. James. We'll help you get used to all of this in time. I smiled, accepting that this meal was definitely beyond my usual comfort zone. Later that evening, I found myself perched on the edge of a large bed, staring blankly at the wall. Today had been a whirlwind of experiences. After dinner, where the concierge had barely acknowledged me, Cassandra suggested I get fitted for new clothes now that she knew my sizes. She had ordered suits, saying I would need them for my new job, regardless of how everything played out. I couldn't wrap my head around it. All of it was paid for by her company. The last thing on my agenda for the night was the DNA test she had arranged at a nearby lab, open until midnight to collect a blood sample. She insisted on having complete clarity before discussing the company I was to inherit. Every time I asked for details, she shut me down. All I gleaned was that most of it was based in Europe, judging by her accent. Those thoughts spiraled in my mind, making it hard to drift off to sleep. When I finally woke, the sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a golden glow into my penthouse suite. The view was breathtaking, yet the reality of being in a penthouse felt surreal. Last night had drained me. From the moment Cassandra had persuaded me to step into that luxury car, I felt out of place. Watching how the upper class treated the working class was an eye-opening experience. Cassandra moved effortlessly through the crowd, making demands that went unquestioned. With a sigh, I stood and slipped on the clothes I had worn the previous night. The tailor had informed me that my first suit wouldn't be ready until noon, and I longed for a clean shirt and a comfortable pair of jeans to change into. After dressing, I decided it was time to seek out breakfast. Surely, a place like this would have something good to eat. When I opened the door to my room, I was surprised to find one of the security staff sitting casually on the couch. It was unusual to see someone in that position looking so relaxed. As soon as he noticed me, his expression shifted to one of formality, and he stood up. "No, it's all right. Please, stay seated," I said quickly. He hesitated, then sat back down. "Thank you, sir." "Just call me James," I replied, walking toward him and extending my hand. He took it gently. "I'm Ben. Is there a problem with the room?" I smiled, feeling a bit more at ease. "Not at all. I'm just looking for breakfast and wish I had a nice pair of jeans to put on." Ben considered me for a moment before nodding. "I'll make a call. The concierge can help with that." "Thanks, Ben," I said, smiling back at him. We sat together, watching the morning news. The anchors discussed celebrity weddings and silly antics, their banter a stark contrast to the whirlwind of my recent life. After the weather update, there was a soft knock on the door. Before Ben could stand, I opened it myself. Standing in the doorway was a young woman, her face lit up with a bright smile. As I looked up, a frown crossed my face at the unexpected intrusion. I stayed quiet, simply gesturing for her to come in. She wheeled in a small cart topped with 2 silver covers, and beside it lay a bag from a fancy store. With a flourish, she unveiled our breakfast, exquisitely prepared eggs Benedict. Then, without a word, she placed the bag on the floor and exited quickly. I exchanged a glance with Ben, who shrugged. "Shouldn't there be breakfast for your partner and Cassandra?" I asked, handing him a plate. He took it with a grin but shook his head. "Greg and I work different shifts. I work mornings and crash early, while Greg handles the night shift. Miss Cassandra usually sleeps in and doesn't like to be disturbed." I nodded, taking my plate back to the couch as Ben followed me. Settling down comfortably, we dug into our meals. Honestly, those were the best eggs Benedict I had ever tasted, but the thought of how much they probably cost lingered at the back of my mind. After we finished, I gathered our plates and set them back on the table. Grabbing my bag, I decided to take a shower before trying on my new clothes. Unfortunately, they weren't the comfy jeans and t-shirt I had been hoping for. The undergarments were nice, but the jeans felt uncomfortably tight around my legs, and the shirt clung too closely at the bottom. At the very least, the bag contained some soft socks and a pair of leather shoes. I sighed. This probably cost a fortune. I would have been happier with a simple $10 pair of shoes and a cotton t-shirt to go with them. When I returned to the living room, I found Ben still lounging on the couch. His eyebrows shot up when he saw me, and I playfully poked him with my finger. I headed to the fridge and grabbed a chocolate bar before plopping back down beside him. "I feel like I'm wearing a giant bag," I complained. Ben couldn't help but laugh, and soon enough, I joined him. But our laughter was cut short when Cassandra's bedroom door swung open. Ben froze, his laughter abruptly stopping as he moved to the wall with a blank expression. "What is all this noise?" Cassandra asked, her frown deepening. "Sorry, miss," Ben replied quickly. "I was just chatting with Mr. Matthew." I stared wide-eyed as Cassandra shot him an annoyed glance. "Sorry, Cassandra. I got him talking, and we lost track of time," I said, trying to defuse the situation. Cassandra's face softened slightly. "Please, James, try to be quieter in the future. Some of us need our rest." Turning back to her room, she added, "I'll need breakfast in 20 minutes. "Right away, miss," Ben said flatly. He nodded at me in thanks before pulling out his phone to order breakfast for Cassandra. I settled back on the couch, tuning into a sports report when Cassandra returned. She sat beside me, took the remote, and changed the channel to a music station. "That outfit looks much better on you," she said, finally glancing my way. "Don't worry, I'll pay for it from my account. It's better than those clothes you wore yesterday." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. What I wore yesterday wasn't exactly stylish, but it had been comfortable. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation away from my wardrobe. She sighed. "No, I really don't like sleeping in places like this. The bed was far too hard for my taste." I glanced at Ben, who rolled his eyes, fighting a smile. I struggled to maintain a serious expression as I replied, "That's unfortunate. I hope you can get back to your own bed soon." "I hope so too," she replied. "We should have our results back this evening. If you're the right match, we should be home by morning." This time, I couldn't hold back a sigh. "You're not going to tell me where that is, are you?" "I'm sorry, James, but I really can't share the details just yet," she said, her tone firm. "What if I want to know?" I asked, feeling a rising frustration at the lack of answers. Cassandra looked confused for a moment. Why would you want to know? I turned to her, making sure I had her full attention. Just yesterday afternoon, I was broke and worried about where I'd sleep. Now you're telling me I might be the heir to someone I've never met. From your accent and manner, I can guess he's probably rich and from Europe, but you won't tell me anything about who I'm supposed to inherit from, why I'm inheriting, or where I'm going. Cassandra chuckled softly. You won't be sent anywhere. If you really are the heir, you'll be flying in a private jet. That's exactly what I'm talking about. How can I be sure this isn't a trick? Cassandra's expression shifted as she pondered her response. James, I'm sorry, but I can't give you any details right now. You'll understand soon enough. I shrugged. Okay, just let me know when you find out. With that, I turned and walked out the front door, heading to the elevator. Since I was on the penthouse floor, the private elevator opened as soon as I pressed the button. Inside, I pressed the button for the ground floor, and as the doors closed, I caught Cassandra's surprised expression. When the doors opened, I stepped out, deliberately ignoring everyone, even the concierge, who didn't seem to recognize me as I walked past. It took me most of the day to make my way home. I spent over an hour finding a road I knew and then followed it for another hour until I finally spotted a familiar landmark. By the time I passed the soup kitchen, they were starting to prepare dinner. Walking in, I received a few curious looks from the regulars, but I just shrugged and said, "Don't ask." An hour later, I climbed the stairs to my apartment. The familiar smell of the hallway reminded me of how my life was changing. "You must be Greg," I said, offering my hand to the man standing nearby. "Sir," he replied, shaking my hand firmly. "Don't tell me she's inside?" "No, sir," Greg smiled. "She's busy organizing flights. We're leaving in an hour." "Oh," I said softly. "Is that all?" "No, sir," Greg said seriously. "I was sent to bring you to the hangar. Miss Cassandra expected you to come back here." "Oh," I replied quietly. "So I'm the one, right?" Officially, I was supposed to talk to Cassandra first, but the news hit me hard. "Yes, we got confirmation an hour ago. You are the heir to Boris Carmichael," Greg said, his voice steady. My heart raced as I unlocked my front door, my mind swirling with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Inside, I grabbed a few items that held deep meaning for me: my laptop, a cherished photo of my parents, and my divorce papers. I handed the bag to Greg, who closed it for me, and then I slung it over my shoulder. "We're heading north," Greg informed me. "Your estate has a private airfield near a small mountain range. We should be home by morning." I nodded, steeling myself for what lay ahead. As I stepped outside, I didn't bother to lock the door. Greg shut it behind me, and as I reached the bottom of the stairs, a sleek limousine pulled up. Ben, the driver, nodded politely. Greg opened the door for me, and I climbed into the backseat. To my surprise, the sound of a champagne cork popping greeted me. "Congratulations, Mr. Matthews, or is it Carmichael now?" Cassandra beamed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I blinked, taken aback by her cheerfulness. She held a couple of glasses in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other, her sparkly dress catching my eye. As I accepted a glass from her, she filled both with bubbly liquid, a little spilling over the rim as she chuckled softly. I took a sip and smiled, letting the effervescence wash over me. "I had this flown in from France," she explained, her excitement palpable. "Very expensive, but worth it." I kept my thoughts about my favorite $20 brand to myself, feeling a bit tense. After a few more sips, I leaned back in my seat. "So, are you going to tell me more about all this now?" I asked, still grappling with the weight of the situation. Cassandra let out a sigh. "Really, James, you need to relax. There's a form to sign on the plane to accept your titles, and once that's done, everything will be yours. After that, It's all training to help you get up to speed. For now, I suggest you enjoy yourself a bit." Following her advice, I sipped my champagne until we reached the airport. Moments after we parked, the door opened, and Cassandra quickly climbed out, still holding the bottle. I followed her, trying to ignore the curious look Ben was giving me. My breath caught in my throat as I laid eyes on the sleek silver Gulfstream in front of me. It was stunning, just like Cassandra's dress. I moved slowly behind her as she stumbled slightly going up the stairs. I managed to enter without a hitch, catching Cassandra as she finished the rest of the champagne bottle in one go. Lowering the bottle, she turned to me with a playful wink. I watched her adjust her dress as she stepped through a door at the back. Remembering how tricky moments like this could get, I felt relieved when Ben and Greg followed me on board. "Ben, can I ask a quick favor?" "Of course, James," he replied promptly. "Just stand there and watch me for a moment," I said, moving toward the doorway Cassandra had gone through. I peeked inside and saw her sprawled out on a bed, holding the empty bottle under her arm. "Ben, come here. I need a witness," I called quietly. Once he arrived, I quickly took the bottle and set it aside, then covered her with a blanket to ensure she was comfortable during takeoff. After quietly leaving the room, I nodded my thanks to Ben and took a seat near the front of the cabin. Less than 20 minutes later, we were in the air. Ben, Greg, and I shared a quiet drink before I settled into my seat for a quick rest. It felt like the moment I closed my eyes, I was shaken awake. I opened my eyes to find Ben hovering nearby. "We've landed, sir," he said softly. Groaning, I stretched and felt much better. I stood up, pulled out my phone, and saw it was just after 3 a.m. Relieved that I was still on track, I followed Ben outside. It was still dark, and the stars shone brighter than I had seen in years. In the distance, I could hear someone being helped, which felt a bit strange. A short distance away, I noticed Cassandra being assisted into a car by someone I didn't know. Ben led me to another vehicle. Before I could ask, he cleared his throat. "Miss Mary asked for a second vehicle. She didn't want to bother you while Miss Lays is not feeling well." I shrugged and climbed into the front seat of the black four-wheel drive that Ben pointed to. As I buckled my seat belt, I had a small feeling that I had just passed some sort of invisible test in Ben's eyes. "So, what can you tell me about this place?" I asked as we started driving. The road was hard-packed gravel, making for a slow but smooth ride. "We're heading to the second gate. Your new home is quite private. There are 3 fences and a stone wall around the house. It's designed to keep people out and protect the animals," Ben explained, a hint of pride in his voice. One of Boris's hobbies was horse breeding. "You now own a small group of Clydesdales." I laughed, intrigued by the thought of owning horses and curious about the kind of person Boris had been. "What else can you tell me about the property?" I asked. Ben shook his head slowly. "Sorry, James, I'm just a bodyguard. I know there's a radar station for weather events and a building where Boris was working on something for the military. Most of his business was in banking and pharmaceuticals, as far as I know." That information made my mind race. Whatever kind of person Boris had been, I was about to take on some big responsibilities. I hoped I could handle it or at least find someone who could guide me. After passing 2 guard posts and an electronic gate, I finally caught my first glimpse of my new home. With Cassandra having left the car earlier, it was just Ben and me. As we arrived, I was struck by how the place looked less like a home and more like a mansion. It stood 3 stories tall, adorned with tasteful decorations and well-manicured hedges. The driveway was a wide expanse of paved asphalt leading up to the impressive entrance. I took a deep breath, anticipation swirling in my chest. This was it. My life was about to change in ways I could hardly comprehend, and I had no idea what awaited me inside those walls. The estate sprawled out before me, its grand entrance boasting a circular driveway wide enough for large vehicles. Given the size of the property, it was clear it had seen its share of impressive transports over the years. The lights in the foyer glowed warmly, illuminating a figure standing just inside the open front door. "That's the butler," Ben remarked as we walked closer. "He might seem a bit tough at first, but he's reliable. Boris hired him years ago and left him some company stock in his will." "Got it," I replied, taking in the details. "What's his name?" Ben shook his head. "Sorry, I don't think Miss LS knows his name either. You can just call him Frank." I nodded, appreciating the insight as we approached the older man. His expression reminded me of my last visit to the principal's office, serious and discerning. Nevertheless, I smiled and extended my hand. "Hi, you must be Frank. I'm James." Frank looked surprised at first, but he quickly accepted my handshake. "A pleasure, sir. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your room." With that, he gestured for me to follow, while Ben waved goodbye and headed off in another direction. As I trailed Frank, I couldn't help but admire the impressive main foyer, filled with exquisite artwork and tall wooden pillars that seemed to reach for the sky. The entire place felt like a grand masterpiece. Frank led me up a magnificent staircase that split on the second level. While the stairs curved up to a third floor, Frank turned left. "The rooms are grouped together," he explained. "The first floor has the kitchens and staff quarters, the second floor has family and guest rooms, as well as business offices. The upper level features the observatory and library, which overlook the pool and training area. Beyond that is the barn." I nodded, thoroughly impressed. This place was amazing. Along the way, a series of portraits caught my eye. Some were very old, chronicling the family's evolution through the years. The last painting depicted a balding, slightly heavy man with a serious expression. "Frank," I asked, pointing to the painting, "who is this?" "Yes, sir," he replied. "That is Boris Carmichael. If I may speak freely, his appearance didn't quite reflect his character in life. He never accepted failure." I nodded, turning away from the stern face on the wall. I hoped my own portrait would be more cheerful. As we continued down the hallway, Frank stopped before a large door. Carefully, he pulled it open and gestured for me to enter with a slight bow. Stepping into the room felt like stepping back in time. Beautiful landscapes adorned the walls, and heavy drapes framed what appeared to be the largest window I had ever seen. In the center of the room stood a massive four-poster bed that dwarfed a king-sized mattress, alongside a small dining table set for two. "Sir, through that door," Frank said, pointing to another entrance across the room, "you will find the bathroom. The thermostat is by the door, along with the light switch." I shook Frank's hand with a polite smile. "Thank you, Frank." He returned my smile, saying, "You're welcome, sir. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to get some rest now. There's a call button on the nightstand if you need anything." With that, the elderly man quietly left, closing the door behind him. After taking a moment to absorb the luxurious surroundings, I decided to explore the room further. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ben standing there, a large bag in his hands. "Hey, James. I brought you a change of clothes," he said, handing over the bag. "And I need you to sign this form." I placed the bag on the floor and glanced at the form. It was a simple confirmation of my identity, with DNA results attached, but I didn't pay much attention to those. I quickly signed the document and handed it back to Ben. "Thanks. Miss LS would have been upset if she didn't get this tomorrow," he sighed. "Well, more upset than usual." "Is she always like this?" I asked, genuinely curious. Ben shook his head. "Not really. I've seen her drink before, but not like that. She's usually more quiet." I nodded. "Thanks, Ben. I'll see you in a few hours." After Ben left, I decided to take a shower. The bathroom was surprisingly large, almost the size of my entire apartment. In the center was a huge, sculpted bathtub, spacious enough for a small gathering. Next to it was an open shower with multiple shower heads, ensuring a thoroughly refreshing experience. A retractable bench was built into the far wall, offering convenience, while a sink and a mirror with simple yet fancy toiletries completed the space. One peculiar feature caught my eye, a small booth-like structure with several holes in the walls and a single red button inside. Curious, I stepped in and pressed the button. A gentle whirring sound began, and warm air enveloped me like a soft breeze. No towels were necessary, I realized. Turning back toward the bath, I noticed a hidden area behind it. It was just as stylish as the rest of the room, but it turned out to be a toilet with a built-in bidet. Strangely, there was no toilet paper, which I would have to get used to. Once I finished preparing, I stepped into the shower, which was digitally controlled. I pressed a button, and the water flowed at a perfect temperature, gradually adjusting to my comfort. A soft beep caught my attention. I glanced at the blinking control panel and pressed the up button twice to increase the temperature. Next, I looked for soap and discovered nozzles built into the wall. The first nozzle dispensed lemon-scented body wash, the second was shampoo, and the third was conditioner. A little while later, feeling clean and refreshed, I pressed the button to stop the water, and it turned off immediately. With a smile, I stepped out of the shower and moved to the drying area. I closed my eyes, enjoying the fresh air surrounding me. After 30 seconds, I emerged completely dry. At the sink, I found a toothbrush and toothpaste. After a quick brush, I left the bathroom, and the bag of clothes was still waiting by my door. It felt strange to be in such luxurious surroundings, yet exciting as well. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, even if it meant navigating the complexities of this new life. Walking through the halls in nothing but my clothes from the previous day felt strange, but I had no choice. I grabbed the bag I had stashed away and pulled out its contents. Inside were a smart outfit, dark gray pants, a matching belt, a crisp white shirt, fresh socks, and a pair of leather shoes. A quick glance at my phone revealed it was nearly 6 a.m. at that hour. I figured it wasn't worth trying to get more sleep, so I quickly dressed and left my room to explore. I wandered around the second level, unsure if any other rooms were occupied. I didn't dare open any doors, but as I strolled, I couldn't help but admire the many paintings lining the walls. Each piece seemed to tell a story, and I realized I didn't even know how I was related to Boris. One painting caught my eye, a lovely young woman with bright eyes and an enchanting smile. I found myself wondering about her life and how she fit into this complicated family tree. When I reached the staircase, I decided to head down to the ground floor. Frank had mentioned kitchens, and I was ready for breakfast. As I descended, a sweet voice echoed through the hallways, pulling me in with its melodic quality. The woman singing wasn't performing in English, but her voice was utterly beautiful. Following the sound, I came upon a door marked kitchen. With a gentle push, I opened it and stepped inside. Inside, a young man stood at a large stove, stirring a pot, while a young woman chopped vegetables with remarkable speed. They didn't notice me at first, so I stood quietly, captivated by the woman's enchanting song. Just as I began to lose myself in the moment, the young man caught sight of me. "Oh. Good morning, sir," he exclaimed, quickly straightening up. The young woman stopped what she was doing and turned toward me, offering a small bow. She was lovely, just a bit shorter than Cassandra, with a warm presence that made her all the more charming. Her short brown hair was neatly styled, and when her blue eyes met mine, she looked down, a hint of shyness washing over her. "I'm so sorry to have disturbed you," I said quickly, feeling a bit awkward. "I was just looking for breakfast when I heard you singing." The young woman turned a shade of red, her embarrassment evident. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll try to be quieter," she stammered. Her voice had a softness that reminded me of Cassandra's, and I could see her shifting from embarrassment to concern. "No, please don't stop. Your singing is beautiful," I said, hoping to ease her discomfort. She blushed even more, but then the young man interjected, "I need those vegetables soon." "Sorry, sir. I have to get back to work," the young woman replied quickly, turning back to her task with impressive speed. "Breakfast will be brought to your room, sir," the young man said, turning to me with a friendly smile. "Is this your usual wake-up time?" I nodded. "Yes, about now. I got up a bit earlier after last night." "I'll have your meal ready at the same time we prepare breakfast for the staff," he assured me. "Do you cook just for me?" I asked, intrigued. The young man paused. "Miss Ellis and Mr. Gregg usually wake up later, so their meals are prepared at a different time." "That makes sense. Just make whatever you all eat, there's no need to make something special for me." Suddenly, there was a loud clang followed by a gasp that caught my attention. I turned to see the young woman struggling to pick up a large metal bowl. "I need to wash this again," she said, moving quickly to the other side of the kitchen. I nodded my thanks to the young man and decided to leave, figuring that if the kitchens were here, the staff rooms were probably on the other side. Everyone deserved their privacy, and I didn't want to intrude. Instead, I ventured out to explore the pool and exercise yard. As I wandered behind the stairs, I discovered a set of large glass doors that opened automatically when I approached. The moment they slid open, warm, humid air enveloped me. Frank had really downplayed how nice this place was. The pool was enormous, almost Olympic-sized, and it was enclosed in a gorgeous greenhouse. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating outdoor furniture and tropical plants, with colorful birds flitting about. After a brief walk around the pool, I decided to head back and wait for breakfast. I retraced my steps back to my room, where I began unpacking. The only items I had were a cherished photo of my parents to place on the nightstand and my laptop, which I set up. While searching for a place to plug it in, I discovered a hidden power outlet near an armchair. It seemed like a perfect spot to set up a temporary workspace, even though I couldn't really work or go online. With a sigh, I looked for available internet connections. One popped up, but I quickly realized I didn't have the password. Just then, I heard a knock on my door. I looked up, putting my laptop aside as I moved to the door, ready for my morning meal. When I opened it, I was surprised to see the young woman from the kitchen standing there. "I've brought your breakfast, sir," she said softly, avoiding my gaze. "Thank you," I replied, stepping back to let her in. She hurried past me, placing a tray on the small table. It held a simple but inviting meal of scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and toast. "This looks great, thank you," I said, smiling. The young woman looked up at me, a shy smile breaking across her face. "If that's all, sir," she said quietly, "just one more thing, what's the Wi-Fi password?" Her cheeks turned a soft pink as I asked. "It's FBI Surveillance Van 1, all one word, no capitals except for FBI," she replied. I paused, taken aback. "Are you serious?" I chuckled. She swayed slightly, shaking her head. "No, sir. Ben changes the password every week for security and makes it something easy to remember." I laughed, and I caught the quick smile that flickered across her face before she turned to leave. I found myself wondering what her name was. A few hours later, after deleting yet another email from my old landlord, I heard a knock at my door. Cassandra opened it, looking a bit pale but still impeccably dressed. She stepped inside, carrying a bottle of water and a stack of papers. I quickly moved to help her with the papers, and she offered me a grateful smile as I placed the stack on the table. Clearing her throat, she began, "Mr. Matthews, I need to apologize." I looked at Cassandra, unsure of how to respond. "I hope I didn't offend you with my actions last night. They weren't appropriate for my position," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "And I apologize for my sister's behavior. She should have acted more professionally." Now I was really confused. "I won't pretend I've never done something silly after a few drinks," I replied cautiously. "But I try not to make a habit of it." I'm honestly not sure what you mean about your sister. Cassandra paused, watching me closely. My sister, Miss Mary, brought you breakfast. She acted a bit differently in the kitchen, didn't she? Everything started to click into place. Of course, they had different names to avoid confusion. Cassandra was Miss Lays, while her sister, who held a lesser role, was called Miss Mary. I must have surprised Mary with my presence in the kitchen. Oh, yes. She has a lovely singing voice, I said, remembering the way she hummed softly while preparing my meal. Please tell her I'm sorry my breakfast didn't go much better, but it was still nice. Cassandra kept her gaze on me, taking a small sip of water to mask her expression for a moment. All right, James. If you'd like to sit down, I'll help you understand your new life. I smiled and pulled out a chair for her. She returned my smile, and I took my seat. The next couple of hours felt a bit long and a little monotonous. First, I signed a document that authorized Cassandra to act as my representative, which clarified a lot of things I hadn't understood before. We delved into discussions about my shares in the Bank of France. It turned out that Boris and his former partners had invested in a diverse array of industries, banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels, and even airports. I learned that I had ownership stakes in nearly all of them. Boris had shown a particular interest in green energy, channeling significant funds into that sector while distancing himself from coal and oil investments. Cassandra explained that the stocks he held could be pivotal if necessary, even though he preferred to steer clear of those industries. I admired his forward-thinking approach and decided I wanted to adopt the same mindset. The next form I needed to sign was a straightforward bank transfer approval. It didn't take long for me to notice that the bank balance was significantly larger than I had anticipated. This explained why I had a security team. The last document was something a bit more unusual. This is a non-disclosure agreement, Cassandra explained. We have a military research center on the property that's not currently active, but it may resume operations. If you sign this. I quickly scanned the document. There were plenty of technical terms but not much clear information. Turning to Cassandra, I asked, what kind of research do they do here? Her expression shifted slightly, a serious look crossing her face. A better question might be what they don't study, she said. Chemical, biological, and radioactive research is not allowed. Last year, they mentioned their work contributed to developing a new type of armor. They didn't provide many details, but they employ a lot of experts. I can agree to that, I said, signing the final papers. I handed the signed documents back to Cassandra just as there was a soft knock at the door. Come in, she called before I could stand up to open it. The door opened, and Miss Mary stepped in, pushing a small cart. Your lunch, sir, she said quietly, avoiding eye contact. Cassandra watched as the young woman set out our meals, which resembled an elegant version of a Caesar salad. I couldn't identify every ingredient in the dish, but it had chicken, bacon, croutons, a creamy dressing, and fresh greens. Once she finished, Miss Mary packed up her cart and left with a quick nod from Cassandra. I paused to observe Cassandra as she began picking at her salad before I joined in. The quality of the food was impressive, but my mind wandered elsewhere. So, about your sister, I began, curious to know more. Cassandra looked up at me, her expression shifting slightly. Do you two have a close bond outside of work? I'd like to know if you're keeping things professional around me. Cassandra hesitated, choosing her words carefully. My sister and I are very close. We came here together and work hard at our jobs. Many questions flooded my mind. I sensed there was more to her story, but she seemed hesitant to share. That's understandable. What matters is that you both are happy. By the way, how is the staff? I asked. Cassandra frowned slightly at my question. What do you mean? Are they okay? Do they have what they need? Are they treated fairly? I expressed my concerns. Just remember, I didn't grow up with much. Just a few days ago, I wasn't sure what would happen next. It's important to me that everyone feels comfortable and supported." For a moment, Cassandra's smile faded before she replied, "James, I'll ask Frank to check in with them." "No, I'd rather meet with them one by one," I insisted. "Okay, I can do that," Cassandra said, giving me a look that suggested I had something unusual on my face. "When do you want to start?" I smiled back. "I'm free now, aren't I?" Cassandra led me around the second floor. After I familiarized myself with the layout of the meeting, dining, and display rooms, she brought me to my office. Like everything in this house, it was impressive. The walls were adorned with beautiful paintings of various landscapes, and a large bookshelf held books in different languages, some I recognized, while others were completely foreign to me. I made a mental note to explore the library later, pondering whether these might be Boris's favorite books. As I strolled around the room, admiring the artwork, I chuckled when I discovered a giant globe that opened to reveal a hidden compartment filled with scotch. In the center of the room, in front of a tall window, stood a large wooden desk accompanied by a leather chair. I sat down and noticed Cassandra looking a bit uncomfortable as she stood in the middle of the room. "Come take a seat. Let's start with you," I said with a smile. Cassandra still seemed nervous but finally approached, taking a seat across from me. Her demeanor softened, and I could sense a shift in the air as we began to delve into the complexities of my new life together. I settled into my chair, and Cassandra, sitting across from me, straightened her back and took a deep breath. "Sir, I am both your personal assistant and your lawyer. While your business has its own legal team, I represent you personally. My job is to advise you on matters that serve your best interests." I nodded, realizing this was the core of our working relationship. She was my primary advisor, the gatekeeper for all decisions, issues, and ideas. While I appreciated her skills, it also made me aware of how crucial effective communication would be. Anyone who struggled to talk to her would likely face difficulties. Feeling motivated to engage with the team, I asked, "So, how's everything going for you? Do you have any issues? Are you being compensated fairly? How can I help?" "Sir, I have access to the company accounts and a credit card, but I don't receive a salary," she replied, pausing slightly as if considering whether to share more. It was clear there was something she was holding back, but I sensed that pushing for an answer wouldn't yield clarity. "Okay, let's start with this," I said. "If you don't have a bank account, I want you to set one up. Also, draft an employment agreement for the next 12 months with options for renewal. Figure out what you believe your value is, and I'll set a proper salary for you. You can still use the company credit card for work-related expenses." Cassandra gave me an enigmatic smile and nodded. "I'll take care of that today, James." "Great. If that's all for now, can you send in Frank? After him, I'll need Ben and Greg to come in. I'll decide who to talk to next after Frank." Cassandra stood slowly, a curious smile lingering on her lips as she headed out. From her reaction, I guessed I was about to make some significant changes, and I hoped they would be for the better. I wasn't looking for complications, I just wanted a comfortable life for myself and the people who worked here. A soft knock at the door signaled my next visitor. I rose and opened it to find Frank standing there, a look of mild surprise on his face. "Frank, come in. I'd like to have a chat," I said with a welcoming smile. "Sir," he began, glancing around, "I know there's scotch in the globe. If you can find some glasses, I'd be happy to share a drink with you." Frank looked taken aback for a moment before quietly saying, "Sir, those bottles are worth more than I earn in a month." I shrugged, trying to downplay the matter. "Well, let's just have one then," I replied, smiling as I took my seat. Frank opened a compartment at the bottom of the globe, retrieving 2 elegant glasses. He poured an amber liquid into them, then handed me one before settling into the chair across from me. I took a sniff, followed by a sip, making a mental note to find out where I could buy more. It was smooth, with a warm, inviting feel. "Wow, I've never tried something like this before," I said softly. "Yeah, it's very nice," Frank replied, lowering his glass. "I asked you in first because I need you to help get things started," I explained. "I'm interviewing everyone who works here. What do you do? Are you happy with your pay? Is there anything I can do to help you in your job? Can you start bringing people in after I talk to Ben and Greg?" Frank looked thoughtful for a moment, taking another sip of his drink. "Sir, I'm in charge of the household while Miss Lays manages your investments. I oversee everything here. I'm content with what I earn, but I will need to find someone to take my place in the next few years. My wife and I aren't as healthy as we used to be." "Your wife? Does she work here too?" I asked, intrigued. "Yes, sir," Frank replied. "We met when she was a gardener. As a wedding gift, Boris paid for her to attend veterinary school. Now she takes care of the horses." That made me smile. Boris sounds like a good man. "He was, sir. Strict yet always fair. He valued loyalty, which is why many of us stayed after he passed. Miss Lays made sure everyone had what they needed. After Boris's accounts were frozen, we eventually received everything we were owed, and no one is worse off for it." I seized the moment to ask, "How did Boris pass away?" "He had a stroke, sir," Frank said, his expression turning somber. "He passed before we could get him to the airfield and was declared gone when the paramedics arrived. Several staff members, including me, are trained to assist in emergencies. We keep supplies on hand to help until we can get someone to a hospital." "Do we have a helicopter or something?" I inquired, thinking it might expedite emergencies. Frank shook his head. "Unfortunately not. Boris didn't trust them, even though we have a place for one. There's a pad behind the house. He wanted to turn it into a tennis court." I chuckled, considering the practicality of a tennis court versus a helicopter. "All right, maybe you should talk to Cassandra. I think I'm wealthy enough to consider a helicopter, especially for emergencies." Frank smiled as he finished his drink. "Thank you, sir. If that's all, I'll be on my way. Oh, can you bring in a couple more glasses and let Ben and Greg come in before you leave?" Frank nodded and did as I asked, leaving the room with a final polite smile. Moments later, Ben and Greg entered, and the next few hours flew by, filled with conversation, laughter, and good cheer. They were excellent company, but I sensed they wanted a third person for their team. I understood their reasoning and decided to let them handle the recruitment and training process. Kenneth, a young man from the kitchen, approached me with a request. "Could I update the kitchen appliances?" he asked, hopeful. I instructed him to speak with Cassandra about it, and his face lit up with gratitude. The head gardener also had a request. After a brief chat, he headed off to purchase new tools and a small tractor. I even met Frank's wife, Margaret, who turned out to be a delightful woman. She expressed satisfaction with her situation but mentioned she might consider retirement in the next 10 years. As I wrapped up the day, I felt a sense of optimism for what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace this new life and the responsibilities that came with it, eager to foster an environment where everyone could thrive. What surprised me the most was the sudden appearance of Miss Mary, a familiar face I hadn't realized I was missing until that moment. She stood right in front of me, her demeanor soft and welcoming. "Please, have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Would you like a drink?" I offered, trying to ease the atmosphere. "No, thank you," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "All right. Do you know what I've been discussing with everyone?" I asked, hoping to engage her, but she shook her head and cast her gaze downward. There was something uniquely special about her, something that drew me in. "That's okay. Mary, can I call you Mary?" "Yes, sir," she responded shyly. I found myself lost in thought about her presence, so I continued, "Are you happy here? Do you feel I'm treating you fairly? Is there anything you need? Mary shivered slightly before she spoke again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I softened my tone. That's okay. Take your time. Looking up at me with her big blue eyes, she finally said, Sir, a day off would be nice. I sighed, feeling a mix of concern and affection. I liked Boris, but I was beginning to worry. Are you saying you want a holiday, or do you work every day without breaks? Mary lowered her head, her voice almost a whisper. I work every day, sir. Mary, how did you end up in a situation where you work every day? I pressed gently. She looked at me then, and in her eyes, I saw a tiny spark of hope. Sir, I don't have a proper agreement. Miss L.S. helps me with what I need in return for my hard work for Mr. Carmichael and now for you. I considered discussing her family situation, but decided against it. Starting now, you will only work 5 days a week. I'll also pay you for your work. Your sister can still help you with what you need for your job, but I want you to have your own money. Is that all right? I heard her whisper a small thank you before she rushed out of the room, clearly emotional. I was so taken aback by her response that I sat still, contemplating what had just transpired, until Cassandra came to find me. James, did you say something to my sister? She asked cautiously. I shrugged slightly. I honestly don't know. I just told her she could only work 5 days a week and that I would pay her for it. Speaking of which, let's make that a rule, a 5-day work week. If we need to hire anyone, let's ensure they're trustworthy and paid fairly. Cassandra nodded in agreement. I'll have your dinner sent to your room. Would you like some company tonight? I smiled at the tall brunette. Sure, it's been a long day. It would be nice to talk. Cassandra flashed me a brief smile before leaving the room. I poured myself another drink and quickly finished it, gathering the empty glasses as I made my way to the kitchen. I ran into Frank, who quietly took the glasses from my hands and returned to the kitchen without a word. I shrugged it off and walked back to my room. Just as I settled down with my laptop, I heard a soft knock at the door. I closed my laptop and opened it to find Cassandra standing there, looking lovely in a blouse and skirt that caught my eye. I wondered if she had any special intentions, but I was simply happy for her company. Good evening, I greeted with a smile. I was looking forward to talking after a long day. Meetings had been draining, but I was relieved to have made it through. Good evening, James. Our food will arrive soon, she replied. I motioned to the table and pulled out a chair for her. Once we were seated, we chatted about a few things. She thanked me for the days off, and our conversation flowed naturally. Our talk was interrupted when Mary entered with our meals. I couldn't help but notice that Cassandra seemed aware of how focused I was on her sister, but she kept engaging me anyway. James, I think I need to freshen up. Yours looks nicer than mine, Cassandra said. No problem, just be quick. I'm a little tired, I replied sincerely. Before she could say more, I grabbed my laptop and stepped out the door. After I set up in the office, I felt the weight of the day lifting. I quietly checked my room to ensure everything was in order. However, I noticed something unusual on the bathroom floor. I decided to ignore it and continued with my night routine. I took a quick shower, and by the time I crawled into bed, I fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. During the night, I had tucked myself under the blanket and slept soundly. My mattress was incredibly comfortable, and my back felt great, better than it had in years. I got out of bed, stretched, and reached for the same pants I had worn the day before. I thought I should talk to Cassandra about my clothing situation. Knock, knock. Without thinking, I walked to the door and opened it, surprised to find a very embarrassed Mary standing there. Good morning, I said quickly, rushing to find a shirt. Good morning, sir. Here's your breakfast, she said softly, avoiding eye contact. Mary, "What time do the staff usually eat?" I asked, curious. "Now, sir. I'm just delivering yours first," she replied. This made me smile. "Come on, let's eat with everyone else." Before she could react, I placed my plate back on the cart she had brought in. "But, sir." "Please, call me James," I insisted with a warm smile. "Now, I don't know where the dining room is. Please show me the way." With a slight frown, Mary realized I wasn't going to give up the cart, so she turned and began to walk, leading me along. As we walked, I discovered there were dumbwaiters on this floor. Mary quickly placed my food onto a cart and took it downstairs, putting it in a hidden storage room. I made a mental note to ask Sandra about it later. This place seemed to have special rooms or secret spaces. As we descended the stairs, I tried to keep my mind clear. I didn't understand why I was so drawn to Mary, but I could sense her anxiety around me. I hoped I could spend more time with her soon. When we passed the kitchen, I recognized a few rooms. A little farther along, I heard gentle music playing. Finally, we reached the dining room at the end of the hall. It was small, but the large table in the center made it feel crowded. The whole staff was gathered around, chatting, laughing, and smiling. As I entered with my cart, everyone greeted Mary, but the room fell silent when they noticed me. "Good morning, everyone," I said, breaking the silence and hoping to ease the tension. "Hope I'm not interrupting," I said with a smile. "I really enjoy meeting new people." "Not at all, sir," Frank replied, his voice warm and welcoming. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled out 2 chairs for Mary and me. Mary instinctively reached for my breakfast, but I gently reminded her, "Why don't you get your own meal first?" I took a seat next to her, surveying the bustling room around us. "All right, everyone," I said, raising my voice slightly to gather attention. "I don't know how things were done here before, but please just call me James. Treat me just like anyone else." With that, the chatter resumed, filling the room with laughter and light-hearted conversations. The atmosphere was vibrant, and I felt a warmth wash over me. The only one who appeared somewhat uneasy was Mary. She sat still, her cheeks flushed as she picked at her food with tiny bites. "It's okay, Mary," I reassured her, noticing her discomfort. "You can relax. I promise I'm not scary. I just wanted some company for breakfast, and I know Cassandra often sleeps in." Mary nodded slightly, her tension easing a bit, although the blush remained. I took it as a small victory and focused on my meal. My plate was similar to everyone else's, stacked with toast, fried eggs, and crispy bacon, the only difference being a decorative garnish that added a touch of color. I caught a few curious glances as I polished off my meal and then went back for seconds. My bacon, egg, and toast sandwich, slathered in barbecue sauce, seemed to surprise a few people. After finishing my sandwich, I felt a wave of satisfaction. Mary was almost done with her breakfast too. "Thank you, Mary. I really enjoyed having breakfast with you," I said, flashing her a genuine smile. Her face flushed a deeper shade of pink. "It was my pleasure, sir." I shook my head, deciding it wasn't worth correcting her nervousness. Instead, I helped by gathering some empty plates nearby, ignoring the curious stares from the others as I carried them back to the kitchen. Kenneth was already inside, busy working with the dishwasher. "Hey, I've got another load for you," I said, giving him a friendly grin. Kenneth hid his surprise behind a smile of his own. "Thanks, James. I'll take care of it." As I turned to leave, I paused, feeling the need to make things more casual. "Hey, from now on, don't separate my meals. I'll come down and eat with everyone, okay?" "Sure, whatever you want," he replied, still sounding a bit unsure. With that settled, I decided to take a walk around the manor. My first stop was the observatory upstairs. It was an expansive lounge area, featuring a bar on one side and inviting couches arranged in a circle. In the center was a small pile of cushions, perfect for lounging. Above, a large glass dome ceiling showcased thin support beams that appeared to be sturdy and reliable. Satisfied with my exploration, I moved on to the library. It reminded me of a scene from a classic superhero movie, grand and filled with shelves that reached from the floor to the ceiling. A map near the entrance guided me through the various sections. As I wandered among the shelves, it felt as if I were sifting through time. Some books looked centuries old, while others were more recent. I guessed that children had lived here not too long ago, as I spotted modern coloring books nestled among the literary treasures. I picked up a book about horse care and settled into a cozy chair by the window, losing myself in the pages. Hours passed, and suddenly, I heard a small noise. I looked up just in time to see Mary darting between the shelves. A thump followed by a quiet ouch reached my ears, and without thinking, I put down my book and hurried after her. When I found her, she was sitting up on the floor, looking a bit dazed. "Mary, are you all right?" I asked softly. She flinched slightly at my voice, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I dropped a book and tripped. I'm fine, please don't worry." I smiled and extended my hand. She took it, and I helped her to her feet. I then noticed the book she had dropped. "Ah, here's your book," I exclaimed, surprised to see it was a coloring book. Mary looked at me and then reached out to take it from my hands. "Thank you, sir." This time, when she hurried away, she didn't trip. I returned to my own book, eager to learn more about horse care, knowing I would soon be working with them. Around noon, Frank came by to let me know that some clothes had arrived for me. I thanked him and set my book aside. An hour later, I was clean, dressed in a sharp suit, and sitting down to lunch with a cheerful Cassandra. "I still can't believe how great you look all dressed up," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I smiled back, appreciating her compliment. I used to wear suits like this when I worked in finance, but this fits so much better than anything I've worn before. "See? Getting it tailored is worth it," she said with a playful grin. "You really do look good." "I thought I might look too skinny," I joked, oblivious to the brief concern that flashed across her face. I put my fork down, leaned back, and stretched, savoring the moment. We had just finished a creamy pasta dish with rich tomato sauce. "Thank you for the meal, Cassandra. I'm going to take a walk, I still want to see more of this place," I said with a smile as I stood up. "Oh," she replied, her smile fading slightly. "Maybe I could come with you." I grinned back at her. "I want to check out the horses. I've never seen a Clydesdale up close." Cassandra's smile dimmed a little. "I'll let you go, then. I wouldn't want to ruin my shoes. I'll see you at dinner." As I walked past her, I felt a sense of adventure bubbling within me. I imagined there were many paths leading to the stables, probably ones that didn't require taking the main stairs. The foyer was quiet as I descended the staircase, suspecting there were lots of hidden passages for the staff. Usually, besides Mary who delivered meals, I only saw Cassandra and Frank, everyone else kept to themselves. As I ventured around behind the stairs, I passed through the automatic doors again. Inside, it was warm and humid, just like last time. The plants created an atmosphere reminiscent of a tropical paradise. I thought I spotted a colorful bird flitting among the branches of a tree by the pool. Deciding I should ask Frank about swimming shorts, I guessed that even in winter, this place would be inviting for a dip. I continued my exploration, eager to uncover all the hidden treasures of the manor. As I pushed through the electronic doors on the other side of the pool area, I was astounded by what I found. It was an expansive dining area, beautifully designed with dark wood accents that lent an air of elegance to the space. There were screens available to close it off, but for now, it was open and inviting. A fully equipped outdoor kitchen caught my eye, and I imagined lively gatherings around the large tables that could easily accommodate 50 or 60 guests. My gaze wandered beyond the dining area, landing on what appeared to be a barn. It looked more like a spacious shed, and I noticed air conditioners built into it, a detail that struck me as both practical and unusual. Intrigued, I made my way down the path toward a small door, only to find it locked. Just as I was about to turn away, a thought struck me. Frank's wife, Margaret, worked with the horses. With nothing to lose, I knocked twice on the door, waiting patiently for a response. After a minute of silence, I knocked again. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a voice call out from inside. "Coming." The door swung open, and Margaret appeared, her expression a mixture of surprise and delight. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Good afternoon. I've been reading about horses and was hoping you could show me around," I replied, feeling a rush of excitement. Her face lit up. "Perfect timing. I have an hour free." An hour later, I found myself immersed in the world of horses, having met the main breeding group, the show horses, and those designated for sale. They were far larger than I had anticipated, and a wave of nervousness washed over me at first. But with Margaret's patient guidance, I soon found myself gently stroking the mane of a strong stallion. "Promise to return soon to learn more," Margaret encouraged as I reluctantly prepared to leave. Stepping outside into the bright afternoon sun, I grinned and took a deep breath. The air felt refreshing up here, and even the sun seemed to shine brighter, perhaps thanks to the cool breeze. With a smile still on my face, I turned back toward the house. Suddenly, I heard Mary's voice raised in anger. I didn't like it. "Now I don't need you." My heart sank at the sound of her distress. She didn't seem happy, and that instinctively made me want to check on her. "I wasn't asking. I know you need help. I'm the one who provides it, understand?" A man's voice growled in response. The tension in the air thickened as I began to walk faster, drawn to the source of the commotion. The voices came from behind some tall hedges. "No. No more. I'm done being your plaything. Let go of me now." Mary's words echoed through the air, and panic surged within me. I took off running, reaching the end of the hedge and turning to discover a small seating area. A large white stone fountain stood in the center, accompanied by a matching bench, but my focus was immediately drawn to a young gardener holding Mary against the hedge. "Listen to me. You will do as I say, just like before," he said, his grip tight. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. Fueled by determination, I rushed forward, pushing him away from Mary and bringing him crashing to the ground. The surprise in his expression shifted quickly to fear, then to acceptance, and finally to anger. He punched me unexpectedly, and though it didn't knock me down, the impact rattled me. I ducked under his next swing and retaliated with a punch to his stomach, making him stagger back. That moment gave me a chance to check on Mary, who looked at me in shock, her eyes wide and fearful. But the gardener was already preparing to attack again. I feigned a punch, and he instinctively raised his hands to defend himself, just as I had hoped. With a burst of energy, I charged him, using my shoulder to bring him down. We both struggled, grappling for control. He threw a punch that caught me off guard, making everything momentarily blurry. When my vision cleared, I found him on top of me, wearing a triumphant smile. But I was ready. I grabbed his shirt, pulling him forward unexpectedly, and in the chaos, I managed to push against him, flipping the situation back to my advantage. With renewed focus, I aimed my punches at his vulnerable spots. Finally, I landed a strong blow that left him still. Once he stopped moving, I got off him and turned him onto his side, ensuring he could breathe properly. I checked to make sure he wasn't in serious danger. Confident that he would be okay, I turned back to Mary, who remained frozen in shock, seemingly unaware of the chaos around us. "Are you all right?" I asked softly as I walked over to her. She didn't respond, but a single tear slid down her cheek. "It's going to be okay," I said gently, pausing to wipe away her tear. "I heard everything. He won't hurt you again. I promise." At my words, Mary began to cry, the dam of her emotions breaking. "Thank you, sir," she sobbed, leaning into me as I wrapped my arms around her, offering comfort as she released her pent-up fear. I knew I needed to act quickly. Unsure of how badly the gardener was hurt but wanting to ensure he got help, I gently guided Mary away from the scene and toward the house. As we approached the deck area, I started calling out for help. "Ben. Greg. Frank. Is anyone there?" Soon, I heard the sound of an alarm, followed by the sight of Frank running toward me, Greg and Ben trailing closely behind. I tried to help Mary into a chair, but she clung to me tightly, unwilling to let go. "It's over now," I reassured her softly. Moments later, 3 men approached, their faces set with concern. "Over there by the fountain," I shouted, pointing to the young gardener. "One of the workers, he needs medical help. I want him fired and reported for his actions." My voice was firm, laced with urgency. Ben hurried toward the bushes while Greg rushed inside. "Frank, I need some clothes for Mary and something for us to drink," I called out, trying to keep my focus on her. Frank nodded, motioning for us to follow him. I stayed close behind with Mary still clinging to my arm. Soon, we entered the foyer, heading toward the staff rooms. I noticed Greg sprinting past with a bag that looked like it was for first aid. Frank led us down a hallway into a small room I recognized as Mary's. It had a single bed, a dresser, and a mirror on the wall. The shared bathroom was tucked away in a corner. As I glanced around, I noticed only a few personal items, a couple of pictures of a young Mary with an older couple and a framed newspaper clipping that I couldn't quite make out. I turned back to Mary, my heart aching for her, knowing we had a lot to process after the chaos that had just unfolded. As I glanced around the room, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. I had been trying to focus on the articles written in a language I didn't understand, but that felt trivial compared to what was unfolding around me. Mary finally released me after I helped her sit on the edge of the bed, but it didn't last long. She lay back and pulled me into a warm hug, her body trembling slightly as quiet tears spilled from her eyes. I held her close, feeling the depth of her sorrow. "Mary," I heard Cassandra's voice from the doorway, filled with surprise and concern. In an instant, she was beside us, looking puzzled. As Mary began to relax her grip on me, I seized the opportunity to sit up. Cassandra crawled into Mary's embrace, and the two sisters hugged tightly. It was a touching moment. Despite the tension that had erupted between them, I could see the bond that still existed. Part of me wished it weren't under such unfortunate circumstances, but perhaps this experience would rekindle their closeness. Once I stepped away and made my way back to my room, I barely managed to close the door before it burst open again. I turned just in time to catch Cassandra as she rushed toward me, enveloping me in a tight hug. "Thank you, James. You saved her," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I gently patted her back. "I just did what anyone would do." Cassandra pulled back and smiled, but her expression quickly changed to one of concern. "You're bleeding. Let me get Frank." Before I could respond, she dashed out of the room. I seized the moment to head to the bathroom. After washing my hands, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. My cheek and eye were puffy, but I seemed okay overall, except for the noticeable cut above my eye that explained the redness. I just hoped it wouldn't be too sore when I returned to my room. Frank was waiting for me with a bag of first aid supplies when I walked back in. Cassandra was already at the table, her attention on me as she had 2 covered plates of food prepared. "Good to see you. You didn't wash your face," Frank said, his tone teasing. "I need to take some pictures, if that's alright." "Frank, I'll give you a raise if you just call me James from now on," I replied with a smirk. He chuckled. "I might take you up on that, James." He motioned for me to sit down. I settled into the chair and closed my eyes as he took pictures of the bruise on my face. I could hear the bag rustling as he prepared the supplies. "This might sting a little," he warned gently. I nodded, steeling myself as he pressed a cloth against the cut above my eye. I winced as the antiseptic stung while he cleaned the wound as best as he could. A few minutes later, he applied butterfly stitches, and though the discomfort lingered, I managed to ignore the dull ache. Once he finished, Frank left us to eat. Turning back to Cassandra, I uncovered our dishes and recognized the lasagna right away, even with a few extra ingredients mixed in. "So, what really happened?" she asked softly, her eyes searching mine. I hesitated before swallowing my food, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not entirely sure. I came out of the barn and heard them arguing. He was trying to make her do things she didn't want to do," I explained, trailing off, hoping she understood the gravity of the situation. "I think it was about money, things she couldn't get from you. She wanted to end their agreement, but he didn't like that." I took a deep breath, recalling how everything had escalated so quickly. I found them after things had already taken a turn for the worse. I stepped in, and it got heated. I couldn't just stand by and let it continue. Cassandra nodded, her expression serious. "I want security to check the area. Private spaces need to stay safe, and I want to feel confident in our security measures. I want cameras everywhere." "Thank you, James. She's always been such a sweet girl. I don't know how she would have managed without your help," Cassandra replied, her gratitude evident in her voice. "I'll take a shower now. Let yourself out when you're ready. I'll see you tomorrow for lunch," I said, standing up. As I turned to leave, I missed the frown that crossed her face, but it didn't matter. Even though I was interested in her, I felt unwell that evening, burdened by the weight of everything. I wanted to understand how long Mary had been struggling, and I wished for her to feel secure again. That night, as I crawled into bed, I couldn't shake my unease. Even though I felt bad about it, exhaustion soon took over, and I fell asleep almost instantly. This morning, I woke up early as usual, slipping into comfortable clothes. I frowned, wondering if I could simply order clothes online instead of dealing with the hassle of shopping. After dressing, I made my way down to the kitchen. It must have been earlier than normal because I could hear Mary's lovely voice resonating inside. I paused, unable to resist eavesdropping as I leaned against the counter behind her. Kenneth was stirring a pot, likely mixing eggs, and he noticed me as I came in. I waved him off before he could say anything, too captivated by Mary's melodic voice. When she finished speaking, I clapped gently to announce my presence. I couldn't help but smile as she jumped slightly and blushed. "How can I help?" I asked, stepping closer to her. "Sir, there's really no need," she replied, her smile softening my heart. "I want to help. I can cook for myself, but I've never cooked for a lot of people. I want to learn," I said sincerely. Mary turned to face me, her eyes brightening. She nodded and began showing me how to prepare large amounts of vegetables. Half an hour later, the dining room was quiet as I entered with a cart full of scrambled eggs. "Morning, everyone. Don't worry, these should be good for everyone. I just helped a little. I wasn't in charge," I announced with a grin. A few chuckles erupted from the group as I placed breakfast on the table and helped Mary set out the bacon. Someone handed me a cup of coffee, and I found myself seated next to her again. A few minutes later, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The staff seemed a bit uneasy around me. I set my fork down and stood up, catching everyone's attention. "I think it's important to talk about something that happened yesterday. I came across an unfortunate situation involving two of your colleagues. This situation escalated quickly, leading to an unfortunate confrontation." I took a deep breath, looking around the table. "I'm sorry for any upset I caused, but I couldn't let the person responsible stay here because of how they acted. This would have been true even if nothing had happened to me." "Sir," Frank interjected, standing a little way off, "I think I speak for everyone here when I say we didn't know what was going on until yesterday. If we had known, we wouldn't have accepted it. We appreciate how quickly you acted, and we don't blame you." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I realized the team was behind me, ready to move forward. It was a small but significant step toward rebuilding trust and ensuring everyone felt secure in this new chapter of our lives. Once the applause from the team subsided, I noticed a young man among the other gardeners starting to clap enthusiastically. Soon, Kenneth joined in, and before long, everyone in the room was applauding. I sat there, smiling shyly at the unexpected display of support. At that moment, a kind woman seated next to me reached out and took my hand, her face turning a lovely shade of pink. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Mary and I embarked on a 4-hour drive to the nearest town to give our statements regarding her incident. She seemed anxious about staying in a hotel, so I arranged for us to return home the same day. Mary didn't say much during the drive, but I caught her glancing at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. During a short nap, her hand found mine again, but the moment she woke up, she blushed deeply and quickly moved it away. The following day, I devoted my time to familiarizing myself with my new surroundings. I discovered I could order items online for delivery to a nearby location, which the kitchen staff would pick up every few days. It was great to learn that most of our meals came from local farmers, and we also had a variety of spreads and sauces made from nearby ingredients. Only the more unusual items were brought in from other places since we didn't have direct access to the ocean or major rivers. Fish was sourced from other areas, but deer meat came from a local hunter. I was pleased to offer him a higher price once I learned about our arrangement. Soon after, I met a few people in suits who introduced themselves with polite nods. They only shared their job titles and mentioned they would be in the area for a while. When I offered to arrange meals for them if they provided their numbers, they were taken aback and declined, citing national security concerns. Throughout this busy period, I maintained my daily routine. I woke up early to help Mary and Kenneth prepare breakfast, shared laughter and meals with the staff, and spent the rest of my day making important business decisions while interacting with Cassandra. However, I noticed that she was growing increasingly frustrated with my lack of engagement in our discussions. I couldn't help but wonder how long it would be until I had to share a bedroom with her. To shake things up a bit, I started visiting the barn more regularly. Margaret finally approached me, curious about what I wanted to do with the horses. I admitted that I didn't have a clear plan, but her expression brightened when I suggested she continue with Boris's work. It was a Sunday, during the second week of my new life, when I was finally pulled away from the mansion for a significant event. One of my pharmaceutical companies had acquired another, and a press conference was planned for me to announce the deal. When Cassandra informed me, I frowned, feeling slightly blindsided. Why wasn't I informed earlier? I asked, my brow furrowing. Cassandra appeared concerned as she explained, Boris handled the deal since you hadn't been directly involved. The money changed hands after you took over the accounts, but you can contest it if you wish. It didn't take long for me to decide. I could see the relief wash over her when I chose to move forward as planned. She also double-checked for any other pending deals, and to my surprise, the company I had acquired was just a short drive from my ex-wife's home. Upon arriving, I met with a few directors and explored the facility. This company was smaller than I expected but had a robust research department. Boris had acquired it with the promise of increasing their research budget and moving production to larger, more efficient plants. I decided to raise their retirement packages well above what they expected, which I hoped would show my commitment to the staff. The remaining staff were reorganized smoothly, and we faced no major issues. As the day of the press conference approached, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The bright lights were blinding, but I answered questions honestly, trying to focus on the people in front of me. To my surprise, a retired staff member spoke up during the conference, expressing his gratitude for the generous severance package. His words eased my tension and made me feel more confident about the decision to move forward. That evening, Cassandra and I stayed at a hotel. After a long, busy day, She seemed to want to keep the mood light, but I could tell she felt let down when I suggested she get some rest. The next day, I decided to explore the town before noon. As I wandered, a toy store caught my eye. A teddy bear in the window drew me in. It was brown and fluffy, dressed just like how Mary used to dress, so I couldn't resist buying it. The shopkeeper looked pleased with the sale, particularly since his store hadn't seen much business lately. I made sure to take a card, promising to recommend him to others if I had the chance. After a quick lunch with a tired but apologetic Cassandra, we agreed to head home early. There wasn't much else I wanted to do, and the longer I lingered in town, the higher the chance I might bump into my ex, which I wanted to avoid. By the time we returned home, it was early evening. Cassandra excused herself, claiming she felt unwell, and headed to her room with Greg's help. Ben smiled and said goodnight, mentioning the possibility of a new team member and sharing his excitement about the new schedule. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves as I headed upstairs. Once I dropped my things by the door, I decided to find Mary. My first stop was the kitchen, where I found Kenneth busy with some tasks. "You're back early, sir," he said, smiling as I entered. I shrugged. I didn't see much reason to stay out. Plus, my ex lives in this city. Kenneth nodded knowingly. "Got it. What can I do for you?" "I'm just looking for Mary." "Oh, she's in her room," Kenneth replied. "Thanks," I said and walked away. As I approached Mary's room, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. Sometimes she seemed distant, yet at other times, she would show affection, like when she held my hand. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly on her door. But hesitated when I heard faint sounds coming from inside. "No, please, no," Mary's voice drifted through the wood, filled with worry. A sense of dread washed over me as I listened, realizing something wasn't right. I carefully opened the door and peeked inside, and what I saw troubled me deeply. Mary was sitting on the bed, looking distant and sad, headphones snugly in her ears as if she were trying to drown out the world around her. Not wanting to intrude on whatever was weighing heavily on her, I quietly closed the door and decided to give her some space, promising myself I would check on her later when she was feeling better. As I walked back to my room, I remembered I had left something on the floor outside her door. I turned back, listening intently to the silence. After a moment of contemplation, I sighed and returned to my room with a heavy heart. That night, the cold shower felt fitting for my somber mood. The only comfort came from the warm air of the dryer in the next room, as I waited for my mind to settle. Hours passed before I finally drifted off to sleep, but the unease lingered into the next morning. Part of me wanted to talk to Mary about what I'd seen, but another part hoped to pretend nothing had happened. Above all, I wanted answers. Deciding to act as if everything was normal, I got ready for breakfast. The walk to the kitchen was uneventful, with Mary's gentle humming providing a familiar backdrop. As I entered the kitchen, I nodded to Kenneth, who was busy preparing the morning meal. Without exchanging words, I grabbed a knife and joined Mary at the counter to help chop vegetables. Her tune faltered for just a moment, but she quickly picked it back up, and I felt a small smile tug at my lips.